Welcome, mere mortalites, to another episode of the Mere Mortals Musings. You have Kyron here. Jeez.
Yeah, Juan over here, folks.
I'm not trying to imposter him. I was just about to say we're in Juan's new setup here, so
Yes.
if it sounds different, that's why. Hopefully, it still sounds pretty good. I think it shall. But yeah, we're in Juan's spacious, very cool.
Den.
The
nice
den.
and cold. It has been humid today, so it's been humid all day in Brizzy, and it feels nice and cold in here. This is the first time that I'm like, oh wow, I'm not going to sweat a bucket load in whatever weather is out there.
In Kyron's spare room.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we've gone away from the other studio, folks. So we'll still probably be using it. You know?
What if the podcast is actually worse because we're not sweating?
Maybe it's not
It's
like
like a sacrifice.
It's not like a
that
level
needs
of
to be done.
anxiety or a level of stress being like, oh man, I'm going to actually deal with this.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anyway, all right. Today's episode is a musings one, so that's where we go into a particular topic that hopefully we know deeply, and today's I definitely do know deeply, and try and give some practical advice from that, the maybe philosophical level, and bring it down to actionable things, which might be of use to those at home, or might just be, today's probably more just a general knowledge one, which I would say a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, I think this will be general knowledge, and you'll probably see it because I wasn't sure exactly what information you're going to bring. And again, for maybe a bit of a summary, we're going to be looking at the podcasting trends of the last year, or is it going to be just in general?
I've talked about the podcast industry in general, so I split this up into history, the podcast industrial complex.
Cool, okay. Yeah.
Some predictions for the coming year, and then, just a summary. I suppose why it's pertinent is for the past 2 or 3 years, this has probably been the dominant thing that I've been looking at or researching or ingesting in terms of information. So, and that was just because I wanted to get better at podcasting. It's yes, I have been listening to a lot of podcasts about podcasts, which is something you tend to do as a podcaster. And the trick is to not let that be then your podcast talking about podcasts that you've seen.
True,
so you got to I think we've steered clear of that for the most. But yeah, most notably, it was like Podcasting 2.0 and Podnews Weekly is what I've been.
So is this going to be
on the regular?
Is it going to be generally flavored towards value for value?
No.
Okay, cool.
I would say it's the podcast industry as a whole.
Okay.
And why I came up with this now was it's the time of year where everyone's making predictions or like end of year look back, what's to come for 2024.
Yep.
So I've done kind of some research on what the
industry due diligence has been made.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this episode will be about all of that and not particularly about ours. There might be a slight little touch of it right at the end, but no. So I thought maybe just going over a little bit of history could be useful because this will kind of build up to what the podcast industry is. Because you might, here's a question for the start. Do you think there's a podcast industry in the same way there is like a music industry or a television industry? And if so, how big or small or convoluted is it?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think it's gone over $1.4 billion, something like that. I think it's roughly around that number.
People throw around numbers, but I've heard the music industry is like 32 billion, and that just sounds so small to me. That sounds way too small for... I mean, I don't know if they're including like streaming. That's just streaming, but I'm imagining music industry. When I hear music industry, I'm thinking live events. I'm thinking sales of like live events of music. So this would be like...
So you think it'd be more? Honestly, you think it'd be more if you're going to include all of that?
I would have thought Taylor Swift's just round the world thing would be in the billions just by itself. I don't know. Like how? Like surely it costs a couple of million each show of hers to put together, right?
Yeah, it is a lot. Actually, no, yeah, it would be like a lot of money. Do you think I saw something along the lines of hundreds of $millions of dollars in terms of like what was revenue coming out of that? So yeah.
And when I don't know if once again I don't know if it's like costs. Well, costs should be less than revenue, right? So,
on the whole entire industry is actually like running at a loss. No, well, I'm sorry, the number, and I was trying to find something because what I've actually brought to the table is I did a lot of stat checking.
Okay,
I've got a lot of details on stat checking, but I believe the number I saw in some of my research today was $1.4 billion was the number thrown about. I believe it was an ad, but specifically around like ad revenue of the podcasting complex, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So something like that.
Yeah, which once again, like that doesn't entail everything that goes into podcasting. Like that wouldn't capture any of the thousands that we've spent on podcasting. So so let's just do a little bit of history wise. So podcasting, for those who don't know, was first invented 2004 by Adam Curry and Dave Weiner. So
that's a familiar name.
Yeah, you should know that. So it was really building off of what already existed, so existing technology, and this being RSS, which was used for blogs for a fair while beforehand. And Adam was just like, yo, if we put in audio into this as an enclosure, we can then, broadcast this out much the way you can do with text. And so this really solved the need of play on demand. Some people have actually said that the pod, how they use backronyms of something comes up and then you add an acronym to it, even though that's not exactly what it got started for. So a good example of this is HODL, and some people say, oh, that's holding on for dear life. But no, it was just because the dude was drunk and he spelled hold wrong. So podcast play on demand is the backronym of pod.
Right.
But this is like allowing for downloading and computer downtime, essentially. That was like the big innovation of it. So you'd let your computer, this was back in the days of, megabytes of storage and
when you were limited.
Very limited in terms of upload and down. Was that upload and download? Yeah. And so this was like big innovation. And most of the development of features and stuff, I'm pretty sure was built in those first like 5-ish years when
I would assume so.
No one was really using it.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting stat.
It's a good graph.
I saw the same one. So for this one, who haven't seen it, this is a podcast listening graph. And what actually I said when you called out 2004 is basically when podcasting came about. And I'm assuming you know this number. Now, this is US specific, so I'm going to say globally, it's probably a lower number than this. But even in 2006, it was 11% of people who were listening to podcasts.
I think that might be who have heard a podcast in the last 3 months or something like that.
Well, this was whose podcast. This graph was a podcast listening. How many people that they polled were listening to podcasts?
Yeah, but that means like actively listening, or they'd heard it once. Usually that poll is related to like people who have listened to one once in the last month or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I didn't check
so it's not like. So it might say like 11 or 17%, but it's probably more like a couple of percent of people who are
actively. No, that's a good point. That is a good point. Sorry, but in any case, I was like, that number.
People who know about it. Or
have used I was like, wow, that's a lot of people knew it even after a couple of years.
So what one, and I'll have this in the chapter notes, so I won't be able to show it on the screen, is it's a really just gradual linear rise. There's none of this exponential shit for podcast listening over the years. It's at something like 60 or 70% now.
Yeah, I think it was 64%.
But it's just a straight line going up. So one of the things, I guess, is, it was really slow growth over the next 15 years. There was some blips of things like Serial, the crime podcast from, I think it was This American Life, came out in the mid-2010s. It was built by just rock solid consistency. So there's randoms, but also people like Ricky Gervais. If you he had one of the biggest podcasts for like ever, because it was just a radio show that he used to do, and they put it in a podcast form. So he was really early to it. And then history wise, 2019 came, and mere mortals appeared on the scene. So just
that's changed the game. Thing. Yeah, next big thing.
Around that time was when Spotify had a real crack at trying to make it mainstream, and so this was where there was like acquisitions of Anchor, of all of these different. They tried kind of taking over the whole every component of it. So where you upload it. So this would be like Anchor, and I think there was another company they had, a bigger one, which wasn't free. But yeah, so that was where you upload it. The Spotify app, obviously, playing podcasts in it, so surfacing it and that. And then they were also trying to get exclusive. And they did. Joe Rogan, there was a whole bunch of different ones that they did. And COVID just added fuel to the fire. So that there was a real peak up in terms of people listening and then people creating as well around that same time period.
Right. Once again, I can't remember the exact number because I don't think I actually saved it, but I think it was something around the order of, now there's 4.4 million podcasts, right? But we know that it's about 400 and something thousand are the active podcasts.
Yes, correct.
I think it was 2017 or 2018, though, around that time. There was only 500,000 podcasts in total. So you can kind of see that massive jump up from that point to the 6 years.
And that you can attribute tons of that to Anchor, because that was just, their kind of pitch was it's free and you can do it on your phone. And so people were just talking into their phone. Think of like the Clubhouse days when Clubhouse was a thing. You remember that?
I do. I remember trying to get someone give me the invite. I got one. I remember jumping into a few being like, this is going to be the thing.
The next big thing. Yeah. No. Well, that was the thing as well in terms of the history-wise. Over the last 2 or 3 years, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have all tried to add it to their apps, podcasting. And all of them have failed more or less, or like they've just dropped away from it. Facebook definitely did. TikTok had a trial recently. They stepped away from it. Probably YouTube's the only one who's somewhat committing to it with the
X
YouTube
is doing it some levels, but I wouldn't call it podcasting in general.
Yeah, they were going to make it more integrated into Spaces, and I just don't think they've ever really done that.
YouTube's okay though. YouTube's not doing too badly.
Yeah. And we'll have some more info on that for the in the prediction section, because there is a bit of talk about that. But yeah, this all leads on to like, okay, why are all these companies joining in? Unless you've got any more questions about the history.
I think that probably settles it, to be honest. I was just trying to see if there was any other details I had on here that would be worth sharing, but it'll probably come up as we're talking through stuff.
Yep, cool. So the question is why are all these companies coming in? And this gets into the podcast industrial complex, the PIC.
He's got a term for it. Is that the actual term, or we just make that up?
No, there's a term that Adam Curry and Dave had talked about. So there's a lot of attention here, but not a lot of money, I guess, is the big thing. So we're talking just before we started, or right at the start, where it was like this 1.8 billion number or something like that for podcasting. But this is kind of the same thing as maybe Twitter during the Arab Revolution, the Arab Spring, where it was wildly influential, but maybe not many people really knew about it. And I think podcasting is kind of similar. There's a lot of attention. You've got you've got quite a presidential candidates are going on to shows that some of them are using it as their like primary mechanism for getting their message out. Obviously, people like us are trying to make it more of a full-time gig, or at the very least like this weird part-time, full-time thing. And so Adam Curry has he continually says you can't monetize the network. And so like, okay, what does that mean? So basically, back in the day, 2000, around that same period, 5 to 8, 2009, something like that. Okay. He had this company called Podshow, which turned into MeVio. And basically it was a podcasting network. So just think of like, hey, I'm Kyron, the podcast starting up Kyron Network, and I just try and get shows to join me as part of my network. And this way you can do things like helping people upload all their files. Like you can kind of do it on the back end, so they don't really have to do it. You can have shows doing like joint promotions and like synergies, and if you got enough shows in, then you can have advertising and all this sort of thing. And what Adam said was like he had a real crack at doing it, but just internally it was a calamity. It was just too hard to appease everyone, and I think every time he brings it up, he's got like another reason why. So it's kind of like if you listen to like what is money show of Robert Breedlove, it's like every time he comes up with a new answer to what is money. Usually it's Bitcoin related, but for him it was something like advertising caused everyone to complain because it was uneven. So some shows were more popular than others, and so they'd get more
revenue.
Yeah, correct. And then as a network, it's like you're meant to market everyone, right? If you're joining a podcasting network, you'd kind of expect equal treatment, perhaps. But if some shows are making more money,
unilateral treatment,
and
these are the big boys bringing 98% of the revenue. It's like, well, that's what we're going to promote,
and exactly. And so then you'd have these people complaining they weren't getting enough marketing, and if we just had more marketing, we'd be as big as this other show. And then these other shows being like, we're carrying these other ones, like we're helping to pay for their marketing, like we're the biggest ones, it should all be for us. And so it was just, he was basically just saying like every time people try and do a podcast network, other than something like a Chris Fisher, Jupiter Broadcasting, which is, he's part of every show basically, and it's small, tight knit, as in 5 to 10 shows maybe, it just turns into crap and is unsustainable.
I wonder how iHeartRadio or their podcasts grouping? Because I know that they group up like a heap of load. Like they just buy out heaps of podcasts and put them onto the one platform, so like one network.
Yeah, maybe I should clarify in the sense that I'm sure you can create a business out of it, but it won't be a ridiculously big business, is probably what Adam's trying to say there.
Right.
So you can make money from it, but it's just not going to be billions of dollars. Whereas I think that's kind of what's trying to happen with, I assume that's why Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and the likes, they're all trying to come in because they kind of feel like there could be billions here, but it's just like, how do we unlock it? How do we get the secret sauce?
I get what you're saying. Yep.
So I because all of those companies run on advertising, and that's predominantly what's happening with podcasting at the moment. So yeah, it's here's a couple of things from the podcast industrial complex you hear. So some people are bemoaning that there's not enough ads in podcasting. Like
not enough ads.
Yeah, they compare it to something.
Who says that?
This is just like
from who?
Be like industry experts. I haven't
industry
got it. I'll have to find it, but because
enough ads.
This was on Podnews weekly, and James was saying some people were talking about this, and they say it in a like a detrimental light, as in, oh, you don't have enough ads, so something like radio or radio or TV, that's saturated, man. They've basically gotten to the point where you can't put more ads in. It's that limit point where it's more ads equals more people not listening to the ads. They've reached the point, and it's ridiculous amounts. 10 minutes and 30-minute show, or 15 to 20 minutes and 50 minutes or something. And they look at podcasting, which is probably half of that, so maybe like 5 minutes in an hour.
True.
And they're going like,
nah.
Like amateur hour over here. Yeah, so these are the kind of things that the podcast industrial complex will come up with. So for me, it's kind of like, I don't really believe it. Adam and Dave say it. It's kind of fun. The thing with it is, if podcasting is only 1.8 billion or something, that just seems to me to be so small that it can't really be an industrial complex. Whereas,
I don't know if you could call it industrial.
Yeah, like the military industrial complex. Yes. Yeah. That's 100% a thing. But when I look at something like podcasting, it's like, I just think there's the good side of things, and then there's the bad side of things of it. So the good side will be something like, or the healthy side, there's lots of different hosting companies. So we ourselves have tried out Blueberry, Whooshka, Buzzsprout, Sounder, and Casterpod, some self-hosting. So that's just us, and we've tried 5 already, and there's many more out there. Heaps. At least another 20 at least hosting companies. So that's good. You got your choice, and all of them are different. I've got a little chart at home when we're moving once, and it's still got like all of these lists, pricing, what they offer, what they don't offer. And so there's enough room there for you to go out and seek what exactly you want. On the app side of things, I think that's really healthy. Even before podcasting 2.0 came along, there was still a whole bunch of different apps that you can use.
Which I do think is the most widely used
out of all of them.
Yep.
It's Spotify overtook Apple back in the 2019. So that was the
because the stats that I saw, the latest stats, and again, would it be right? I don't know. Apparently, Apple Podcasts is now above Spotify.
They jump back and forth.
Depends where you look at. Yeah.
It depends on the metrics you use. Depends on where you're getting the sourcing from, because and we'll talk a little bit about analytics soon and how they're iffy to say the least. Yep. But yeah, Apple and Spotify dominate the market. They're I think around 80 to 90%.
Well, here was the crazy stat that I saw. So for sure, Apple and Spotify dominated, and I believe that the next one down the list wasn't even a podcast player. Like, it wasn't an app player. It was in fact desktop.
Oh yeah.
So like after Spotify and Apple, it was people going to an actual, like, the website of the podcast and listening there. And then it was other things, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, all the others.
Could be. Once again, with the stats, there's a lot of it is, it's downloads. So it's not necessarily things that people listen to. And there's bots, there's all sorts of stuff. we'll talk more about that soon. But yeah, the app side of things is quite healthy. And even just like the amount of content out there, like you were saying, there's
plenty of it.
4 million shows, 400,000 of them active. No way you're going to be able to listen to even 1%, 0.1% of that in a year. Like even just sampling that many is ridiculous. So there's like a really healthy side of the industry, and then there's the kind of unhealthy side. So there's the things like, and here's just a list of stories that I've heard over the last year or two, which you might not heard of in the people at home. So dynamic ad insertion. So I think this is pretty unhealthy. This is where you basically have people record their audio and then they just say, or they don't say, insert it at like the 25-minute mark. That's where we had a bit of a break, or we switched topics. So that's a good place to just jam in some audio. So this is where I don't have to do it manually as the editor, as producer. The podcast hosting company, they can have automatic insertion. And this is why you'll have some really weird stuff happening where people do it wrong. And so someone will be mid-sentence and then it's like a commercial comes over and you're like, oh, geez, what the hell was that? As a listener, terrible experience. And then you can have some really funny stuff happening, like, so Spotify was doing this themselves for exclusives or people who are on their platform, whether this be Anchor or I think it was Spreaker maybe, or can't remember who. And they had wild turkey ads, so the bourbon, appearing on kid shows and on sobriety podcasts. And there was another one where it was...
They seem to be talking about alcohol. Let's add this one in here.
Right. And there's some other really funny stuff where they're prejudiced against basketball shows because they use the word shoot a lot, or shot. And like, oh, that's related to guns, and so there's companies out there who they'll like analyze transcripts to see how safe or not this particular podcast is to advertise to, and then give like rankings or scores to advertisers, right? So they know like, oh yeah, if you put your ad on this show, it's generally going to be about this content. They're generally not going to talk about this, and so you have funny things like that, where it's biased or discriminatory against something completely irrelevant.
And basketball.
There's other examples of that happening where it was a military ad or something like that being done on a politics podcast about who are really anti-war one, and it's like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened. It's like, well, you should care about
when it's dynamic.
You should care about your show a bit more. There's the dodgy analytics, so we're hinting about that before. So I've talked before about the fake numbers on mobile games, where an advertiser was inserting podcasts into the tiny gap between moving from one level to the next, and that counted as a stream or a download. And so they were boosting up all these shows and saying like, these shows are getting like mad amounts of plays, and therefore your ads are getting played a lot. And it was just people on a mobile app being like, when's this going to skip? So you've got that sort of behavior. And even recently, over the past month or two, James Cridland's been talking about how they've had these just unexplained drops across the whole industry. Basically, everyone in the industry is reporting that downloads are down by like 10-15%, and no one knows why. No one knows what's going on. There's no no one changed the code, and
I was gonna say, no one's changed the measuring technique or the minutes or seconds.
There have been some things, but like this is where I just trust James and that he does this research way more than I do, and he's like, yeah, it didn't really, there was some drops, but it wasn't related to that, and this is happening to all these sort of different things, and even he was like, it's kind of the untalked about thing going on at the moment, where it's like all these numbers are drastically down, but no one really knows nor
why exactly,
or is trying to explain why, which is then like
as in, look, I guess because one assumption would be, whoa, is everyone stopping? No one's listening to podcasts anymore. It's in the downtrend or something like that.
Yeah.
Where maybe, as we're saying, perhaps purely just the numbers, the analytics, maybe it's always been inflated by a particular number for whatever reason. Correct. In fact, here's another, I didn't know how much to believe of these numbers. It was how many listeners do podcasts get on average? And again, this is like as of the latest. In fact, I'm pretty sure this was released on the 4th of January, 2024. What do you think the top 1% of podcasts roughly need to get of listeners to get on average? Like listeners on average per episode, saying so. It's
top 1%.
So it's based on downloads per episode within the first 7 days.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was into the thousands.
It is 5,082.
Yeah,
and I thought, no, okay, that's not like ridiculous realistically. But then again, if you think about how many podcasts are out there, you know, if this number is by the 4 million, well, if you top 10%, that's basically
40,000.
Yeah,
the top 40,000 shows.
Well, okay. But to be in top 10% of podcasts, 478.
See, even those numbers, I'm kind of skeptical of.
Yeah, and I looked at these and I went, okay, I'm reading them, and I want to talk about that, but I go, yeah, I don't know how verifiable some of these things are realistically.
Correct. Yeah, it's I'm some of those ones I kind of question, but you know, because I'm just going like, you know, we're not even close to that. We've been doing this for a while, and maybe we're just really shit at it. That's a possibility.
Maybe.
But I also get the feeling like, yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
Well, certainly, and you know, we talked about it at the beginning. If your graph, you know, gradual going up in terms of a podcast in general, I don't think we've had any podcasts that have reached that top 1% level within 7 days. Not at all. But we've had a few that have gone past that milestone over time.
Yeah.
Over time, I've gone through that.
Yeah. And this is the thing with analytics is a lot of it is kind of behind closed doors. So there's the IAB, which is like a standard, international standard for verifying that something is IAB certified, that sort of thing. And so the podcasting hosting companies, they all have this standard metric, and it's, you know, X many seconds played is equals this, or a download needs to be downloaded this amount, not within this time span, all this sort of stuff. But all of it is rather behind closed doors. Some of this intentionally so because of privacy concerns, because once you have something like Spotify who see every single thing you listen to, or YouTube, for example, then they can really target ads. Once again, this could be a good thing for if you like ads and you're like, oh yeah, I prefer relevant ads for sure. Like I don't want ads about baby stuff if I'm Kyron and not looking at having babies for the next foreseeable future. But then there's also, okay, like, are they going to sell this data on to other people?
Yes.
Yeah. Correct answer. Yes. Correct answer. And so you get this weird thing, and this is where stuff like OP3 comes in, which we have on this very show. I don't think it's on the Blueberry one, but I could probably ask them to do that, where it's essentially like we just put in a little tag in our feed which says, yeah, just show our numbers, because we don't care if people know. Like I actually think it's better if people are able to go and verify. And then the final one that I had here was just third-party shenanigans. So there was a story, you might have heard about it, from Cast Media, which were a podcasting company which essentially similar to a network, but they would, it was basically a podcasting network. And so they had pretty big shows on it. So things like the Theo Von show, I can't remember what that's called, the name of it, and a fair few big American podcasters. And they would do all the stuff with advertisers, like, you know, so that the podcasters themselves weren't having to go to advertisers and have meetings and bargains and negotiations about how much per CPM, blah, blah, blah. No, they did all that. And they would just say, like, just do these host reads, we'll pay you. Once your show's going out, we've verified the downloads, and then we'll pay you. Except they stopped paying them. And so this is where a whole bunch of shows like Theo Von and stuff were complaining, like, oh, yeah, you know, Cast Media, and then this guy at Cast Media was ripping me off, and you know, for millions of dollars, this, or hundreds of thousands, this sort of thing. So you get a lot of weird stuff where it's like this third party behavior comes in. So you know, I kind of say like, oh, you know, Theo Von chose to go with this guy, and you know, people are going to do nasty stuff in business, and so you just got to realize sometimes, okay, like, how can I protect myself if this is happening? Obviously, don't do business with him again. Maybe we'll make him rethink about advertisers and keeping him at arm's length, and maybe want to have them closer. But advertisers don't want to put in ridiculous amount. Like they can't put too much into an individual show, for example. And the Adam Curry always says like the big advertisers is why podcasting's still small. And once again, you can't monetize a network in the sense that the shows themselves, like it's too hard to monitor the content. With something like radio or TV, you have so many different filters of it needs to go to this executive, this executive editor can like cancel, oh, they said a naughty word on that show, like no, we can't do that.
Yep.
And so all the big ad companies, they don't advertise on podcasts. So these are things like the in particular pharmaceutical companies. That's where like a lot of the money is. They don't advertise on podcasts. Car brands, I think maybe some of them, but I think that was also another big one which doesn't really
part of it.
Yeah. And that's just because the medium by and large is still too Wild West maybe, or it's still too easy to have controversies and bad things appearing where you don't want it to appear, all this sort of stuff.
Which kind of makes me feel, and I don't know if it's like the exactness, but it just makes me feel that for them to move into that space, like if you wanted more advertising money, let's just say, if you wanted more money into the podcast industry in that regard, then you would have to become more regulated, more constrained,
you become more mass
filtered,
media. And that I think by and large defaults to kind of almost creating shows to advertise around. So instead of it being, you create the show because the show is
valuable,
something you want to really create, something that's super exciting, you end up creating shows which are, here's an example of it. There was a guy I was following on Twitter X for a bit who he owns Podcast Junkies. That's his podcast, his main one. And yet he wanted to do an experiment talking about, I think it was vertical farming in particular. So it's pretty niche. So this is like, growing lettuces on the side of a wall. So think of like,
niche.
How I believe this is how a lot of the Dutch people farm their vegetables because they just don't have too much space and things like this. And so he kind of intentionally went out to create a podcast about vertical farming. It was something he was interested in, but he went at it with the goal of making it economical for himself. And so getting advertisers on who were niche advertisers related to this industry, and who would, sell the irrigation system or the different types of seeds and things like this. And, he would have executives kind of from those companies on, and he would interview them, and then it would also be like, oh yeah, funnily enough, the show is also sponsored by X company. I think it gets weird when, podcasting origins for me were in the ability for an individual to broadly reach a large audience. So there's no interference, a direct message, whether it was highly produced or not. And I have nothing against like high production audio or quality. It's better than scratchy audio for sure.
True.
But when it gets to the stage of you're coming into podcasting because you want to make a lot of money from it, that's when I think it starts to get weird, and has actually even altered my own little thoughts about value for value and whether I actually really want it to be a full-time gig. I still kind of do, but I'm also like, if it gets to the point where I have to make a decision of like show content versus what will make more money in a value for value world, I'm actually kind of like, that's a barrier I'd need to be careful about. And not going too crazy down. So for example, at the moment, I've been focusing and probably will focus more on having people on the show like Cole McCormick, like TJ Dorfel, who are doing stuff that I think is really cool and value for value related. That is also more likely to draw in people who will support the show in a value for value context or format. So if I got the opportunity in the future to interview someone really cool, or like a friend, like we've done before, like with Matt Ward, for example, I want to make sure that I don't pass up on that opportunity just because I know it won't get boosts, for example.
Absolutely. So as one part of my research for this particular one, I downloaded the Spotify podcast trends, which you have to sign up for
us.
No,
for
no,
Apple,
not
or
for
just
us.
in
For the
general?
entire podcast trends, like the whole podcast landscape. Now, Spotify, you little fuckers, you actually have to sign up for Spotify itself and do all these things to actually get it. So
Nice.
shame on you for this. But it's relevant because as part of this nicely produced like report, right?
Oh, geez. Yeah,
It's quite like full report. As I was going through it, and I'll just give you some of the highlights. They talk about, hey, moments in sports, moments in film. So it's not just about podcasting in here. It's just podcast. It says podcast trends, but it talks about music and Beyonce and film and whatnot. And I haven't like looked into it specifically what that means, but there was a particular piece just a little bit further down that kind of summarizes what they're talking about. It's in general when something large happens in the social space, and I think that's what they're referring to in a few of the other posts. That's when everyone who then talks about that in podcasts gets overwhelming amount of listens. So here's an example. Last year, on the 1st of May, the Met Gala took place. It's fashion's biggest night out. I can't remember if that was when old mate slapped.
No, that was at the Oscars.
That was at the Oscars. Okay, so this is just Met Gala, right? Okay, so this is just Met Gala, moments in celebrity. And there was, so I'll give you some exact dates here. It's got March. They're saying speculation about the guest list heating up. The amount of Spotify podcast streams jumped up at around that particular thing. Mm-hmm. And then you can see very clearly when it was actually on the 1st of May or around that time, the increase of week over week increase in podcast streams. This is of the entire industry, not just for this fact, was 1,208%. Around that particular time.
Jesus.
So so it's like gigantic numbers
Really?
that you see. So it's 1,208%. For other things, so just as an idea,
so that's fashion, right? Met Gala.
Yeah, for basketball, NBA Finals week over week was 500% increase, and for the All-Star game, 11,000%. Right. So there's full, and they map in the actual report. They map it to Google searches and social searches. Right. There's some numbers at the very bottom as well around the year-on-year growth for the audience trends and a couple of things. Mm-hmm. They have some key takeaways, which is what I was like, cool, thank you. I'm summarizing, but getting into that point, it was saying, one, podcasts have become constant companions for people, providing a resource from which to learn, be entertained. Cool, fine, makes sense. But then they were talking about by advertising in podcasts, brands can become a part of an authentic, intimate environment that's built on trust and genuine connection. Okay. There we go. This one. I was going to say, to take advantage of planned or recurring cultural moments like Eurovision or big movie premieres, advertisers should plan for media after the event as well as before, as podcasts often extend the conversation. So looking at the numbers, what they're trying to like specifically highlight in all of this, I went, we're not going to be like that on the Mere Mortals podcast. Not generally. Yes, if something like massive happens that's going on, like we did with COVID, we did it with a few other things.
I guess so, yeah.
But as you see with the summary of some of those things, it can become very overwhelming that, well, if they're saying, hey, the money of advertising, we're telling you, hey, go fund around these areas because that's when more people are going to be listening. There's going to be some influence for the podcast industry and the complex. They'll be like, okay, well, let's talk about the really big things that are happening in the world right at this moment because it's going to maybe leverage more people listening in, and because listening in, then you get more money. So seeing that was actually quite dramatic to me because in a similar sense, I went, I can't let that influence who I want to be talking to, conversations, what I want to be talking about, because it could very easily become, let's just talk book reviews. If, there was a book coming out by, I don't know, someone super influential in the moment, there might be a propensity for me to go, okay, I need to get my hands on this right now, and I must read it as fast as possible and get it out as soon as possible because I'll be, right in the midst of the release of this. Yeah. Okay, if it maps to things I like, maybe. But in general, I'm not going to go get Britney Spears' latest book and read it because I really want to. I just don't have that much of an interest. If I did, I'd go get it. Otherwise, it gets into the, what value am I providing to the individuals? Fine. But I heard something else today, and it's you can only give so much value back to people as much as you are serving yourself. And if we get to a point that we're not really serving ourselves in what we're doing, then it's not going to come through as valuable for anybody else either. Yeah, if honestly, if we change this podcast to, hey, look, we're going to talk about when we come into Musings, hey, what happened in Israel today and what's going to potentially happen in Ukraine tomorrow. Will we get more
Bitcoin ETF?
Yep.
The recent
the recent fake news.
Yes.
The recent fake news of
So
Bitcoin
funny.
ETF, which good call out to Jeff Yu. He called that happening on Monday. Someone actually messaged him about, do you think something like this will happen? And he said, yeah, I reckon something like that would happen. And it happened. So he's got proof of it too.
Good.
But, we could have a whole session on that. And I bet you would have lots of listens, lots of people conversing about it. We're obviously aware of it, but it's not enough that we're going to extend a 1 hour podcast conversation. It's just not valuable for us. It's not going to serve us in any way, shape or form. We might have a laugh about it in this few minutes.
Unless it's really funny.
So I went, honestly too, man, thinking about it, I went, look, if it so means that the podcast complex, the industrial complex means that you have to go down that path, then I don't want to do that. And I need to find other methods of existing to the value that I'm getting, but it's also serving me.
Yeah, they're also at odds with what they kind of want. So, the reason podcasts are valuable, they said it in there, was you can create a deep connection, like I can't remember exactly what you said. It was like a deep, close connection with your audience, something like that. And that is, here we go. By advertising podcast, brands can become a part of an authentic, intimate environment that's built on trust and genuine connection. Yes, correct. But when you try and start neutering the content, that's when all of that goes away. So it's almost like by trying to get into the thing, you destroy the thing itself. If you love a song too much, you find a brand new banger. Here's one for me. It's so funny because it's basically against everything that I'm about. But I think it's called Prada by. It's like Casso and Ray.
Yeah, I love the song.
It's great because it just gets into it so hard so quickly. I love it. But it's all about Prada, Gucci. They just list off Bentley. They're just listing off shit that they love. Super.
It's a good song. It's a good song. I like it.
Great song. Yeah. If I just really got into it and played it every single day, I love the song so much. I want to be closer to it. I want to, it would destroy the song for me. Whereas just listening to it once a day, once every couple of days is good for me. And I know I'll destroy it if I try and go too hard into it. So yeah, it was just funny. You can't have it both ways. You can't have the authentic, deep, intimate connection and also have a shit ton of ads automated into it. It doesn't work like that. You can't have the two.
Nah, I just want to put a pause. I wanted to check if there was any comments. We do have a comment in the chat as well from Desi Philosopher.
You can bring that up. Faraz.
Hey, Faraz. No, it says hello, but there's going to be an interesting question as well. Your thoughts on podcasters like Chris Williamson, who has increased the bar for podcasts with exciting cinematics?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. What would be most interesting to me would be his stats on his audio versus video. And how much his audio gets played versus his video. Because if I had to bet, I would say it's still probably 10-1, maybe. That his audio
10 times on the audio versus the video.
Correct. Or if not, it'll still be multiples above. And I believe the same is for Joe Rogan as well. And other very highly edited video ones.
So one of the things that makes me believe that maybe it's more in line is because how often Chris will be quite specific to releasing content that's to do with the video. AKA, he'll release 1.5 million subscribers, new video release, 1 million subscribers, new video release. He started to create a lot more of behind the scenes videos as well now, that they're not even going on audio anymore.
Okay.
So
interesting.
He's creating a lot more videos. Now, I do wonder whether he's doing that because he's just got more enjoyment out of it. Heck, it's a lot more work for it than what he's doing.
Hell yeah.
He spends a lot of money and a lot of energy into creating some really cinematic stuff. In fact, I saw some of the behind the scenes, and I actually did a deep dive on Chris Williamson of where he began. Seeing all the videos, all that sort of stuff. And he spends a lot of time and a lot of money in setting up conversations in different locations. And man, they look freaking awesome for sure. I see it as a positive in doing it, but obviously there's a lot of there has to be a value at the other end to do all that. I mean, I appreciate it. I don't know whether, like, I would like to do something like that. I also recognize the level of effort that it takes to do that. And one of the other stats actually I saw was, again, whether this is correct or not exactly, who knows, but maybe it's around the ballpark. It said that of all podcasts, 11% of them, 11% do use video formats, or like they record it in some way. And 32% of podcasters that they've polled said that they don't use video and they're not planning to ever use video. So I think that if you look at podcasting as a whole, I think, yes, Chris Williamson is demonstrating that it can be done really like amazingly cinematic quality. For sure, you can do that. How much of an improvement across the entire podcasting landscape is it? Not that much, I honestly.
I'll put it this way. I think it's a brilliant thing for podcasting because it takes, how would I say this? It takes away the pressure of the podcast industrial complex, those forces, the advertising, the people who are really searching for money, trying to come in and screw up all the things that make podcasting awesome.
Yeah.
It's like it's a siphon off to a different realm, this i.e. being YouTube. What he's got is a YouTube show.
Yep.
If there's things going on his show on the YouTube side, which aren't making it into his podcast feed, then those aren't podcasts. Those aren't podcast episodes, those are YouTube episodes. So I think in that respect it's good for the sense like words get funky, and this is part of my notes coming up for the next section, but yeah, words the podcast, what a podcast is, has started to come into question recently, and in particular, this is regards to video, and it's like, are YouTube videos a podcast? And people are starting to think like, oh, if it's two people speaking in front of a camera,
it's a podcast.
That's a podcast. Yeah. Whereas I don't think that's helpful, but it's good in the sense like, one, it's making these sorts of conversations that I think are good to release out, but it's detrimental in the sense like, if everything became like more like those shows, more higher quality, and it's only a podcast if you've got really nice lighting and 2 cameras set up, we've only got 1 at the moment and all these sorts of things, well then it'd be kind of shit. It'd kind of become like TV, which is really plain. You're going to get entertainment, you're going to get like sports, you're going to get this, and you're not going to have wacky crazy stuff and Alex Joneses of the world and like just completely those things that you search for, and you're like, I want to know just like this dude's opinion, or I just want to get some like truth on this, this matter. You just won't have it if everything goes like that. But it's good for him. He does it really well.
I think my time is that I like the improvement on quality. I don't, as long as it doesn't change the minimum viable level that a podcast is needed, because the goods of a podcast still come from predominantly the conversation or the audio or the, what you actually release. Just having it in a video format or the quality that enhances it is just that. It's an enhancement, not a prerequisite.
Yeah, and if stuff starts happening like he stops saying the word suicide because that gets demonetization from YouTube, I'd be very, well, I think that's the antithesis of what makes a podcast good. But yeah, before we jump onto the last section of predictions, do you want to bring up the Boostagrams?
I do. I believe it's empty.
Yeah, so I did put in a couple of things there. Once again, this is the detriment of not having Discord on my phone. I took it off people as part of my monthly goals for.
So bringing it up once again. In any case, Boostagram Lounge, we do like to talk about the folks who've been supporting us over the last
correct.
Couple of weeks.
So we did not get any Boostagrams in, which is a message you can send directly within the podcasting app with a payment of money attached to it. So, hitting the boost button and things like Podcast Guru, Fountain, Podverse, Castamatic, Breeze, True Fans, and what else is there? There's Pod Friend, and there was one more, which I Curiocaster. If you do that, we get that message to us. None this week. A little bit of a bummer. Hope to don't make me bring out the sad puppy people. But I did see some interesting streaming behavior, which I wanted to call out. So there was 2 little screenshots that I took from my Albi account there.
Yeah, there was. So there was 2. One sender, Nicholas B58, total amount 21, which was stream.
Yep. So the cool thing about that was on the Adam Curry episode that I put out ages ago. So it was someone going back to a really old episode and streaming in, which is very rare to see. And this is like one of the things that got us excited about value for value right at the start, which was like, oh my God, it's like the back catalog can be monetized, oh my God, which wasn't really happening, but thank you, Nicholas. Very, very cool.
And then another one from Mike Newman. That was 75 sats streamed on podcast Arts In with Jimmy V.
Exactly. So this is pretty cool because this was, check out the linkage on this. So I was on Podcasting 2.0 a couple of weeks ago, and I got put in as a split for that show. Now, what Jimmy V has done is somewhere in his podcast that he's created, he took a clip from that show. I don't know if it was me talking or if it was Adam or Dave, and he's clipped that and added that as a value time split, much like everyone's been doing with music. So if you insert a music song into your podcast, you can say to the apps, hey, I want the sats to go off to this musician. I didn't create it, but I want to play it in my show, but I just want them to actually receive the money, kind of value for value. So what he's done there is he's clipped the show and then put the value time split in.
Yeah, and you're part of that.
And then I'm part of that split. So if someone was, it was someone listening to his show, listening to a clip of me or not me, I don't know, I haven't got to that part, talking, and I'm getting some sats from that.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool. Yeah.
So it was only a couple of sats, and I don't know how long they stream for, but I think that kind of linkage is really cool, and that's the sort of thing that is it's kind of like a game changer in terms of how different that is from anything that is possible on YouTube or even just in the normal podcasts at the moment.
Just thinking music-wise, that's like really powerful for music, right? Like that's huge. Just the ability to very quickly be able to be like, hey, bring some music and just give that royalty directly to them.
Yeah, it's starting to get there. So yeah, predictions-wise.
Well, here's so before we get into the full predictions of what I'm assuming the next year, is that basically what we're looking at? Now, I had a quick little chat GPT of
what does ChatGPT?
I went ChatGPT 2023, 2024, and the interesting thing is that it didn't, like, I guess maybe because we are in the knowledge of some other things, what it gave me was what I feel like is either already happened or is kind of happening. So a lot of them was more use of AI voice.
Okay,
that's one thing. So you're probably going to see more.
I could have predicted
voice usage of AI, which I mean I think already is being done. So I could see that being more and more. But then some of the other stuff that I was talking about was like video creation.
Yep,
I was like,
that's another one.
More video creation in that side.
There was 5 that I've got, which are like
let me actually bring it up specifically. What some of the other ones you've got as well?
All right, so to sum all this up, I listened to Podnews and I actually submitted some predictions in. So they did this big show where it was just a wide range of people from the podcast industry. And so I think there was probably close to 15 total, something like that, of people, highlights for 2023, predictions 2024. So I've kind of summed up what all they said. And then I've looked at what the actual podcast industrial complex predicts. So these are just me going onto Google and going podcasting 2024 trends, predictions, that sort of thing. And these are from the kind of type of companies which I would say are the podcast industrial complex. And so they say more AI, doesn't really specify what, more tools, more AI in general, more video. So that's 2 of them. More advertising coming in. More listeners.
I swear I will delete some of the videos if they start getting some of the podcasts that I currently listen to go a little bit more on advertising. I'll be like, that's it.
Nah, bro. More listeners, so more people going to listen to podcasts, and more political content or more content which is derived for like a particular purpose to kind of advertise towards. So that was the kind of like 5 trends from the PIC, the podcast industrial complex.
Here's a couple more. The ChatGPT, which I kind of reflect actually what I was thinking. Enhanced interactivity and listener engagement. Okay. So on Spotify, I don't know if others are doing it. You have like Q&A set up or polls. So there's some of that. So they're sort of suggesting audience participation through social media or dedicated apps. Honestly, I could see a lot more of that in some way, shape, or form. Similarity, immersive audio experience. And so here, start blending again. We're talking about Chris Williamson for us saying, hey, stepping it up the level. Well, what if all of a sudden Meta setup of, you can listen into the Mere Mortals podcast, but rather than being in the viewpoint of this camera right now, you're actually sitting right here next to me. And, you can voice out.
Goggles on or something.
Right. So, that immersive audio experience, okay, does that mean that's a podcast too? And that's the minimum because it's available?
See, I'd agree with some of these, but not for the same reason that I think they've written it down. So I would say live podcasting, as in getting live audio through your podcasting app, which we'll be able to do sometime in the near future. I don't think that's what they imagine. I think they're imagining more the kind of Spotify locked in, oh yeah, you can do a poll. You're like, oh my God, this is a game changer sort of thing, which won't be a game changer for most because I put polls on all the book reviews and I think I've gotten one response or something.
Yeah, it depends, I guess, on the audience as well. But more specifically, like she says, podcasts might start to offer 3D audio or spatial audio experiences, particularly for storytelling and immersive journalism, which, I don't know if people at home have listened to this, but like AD sounds or AD music. No. And so it's usually with headphones, you'll put it on and it'll be like music, but then all of a sudden a lion will roar behind your left ear and then a zebra will run across your right ear and go across to your left ear.
What is it? AD?
8D. I'm pretty sure it's 8D sounds, 8D music.
And what's it meant to mean?
It's just, 8 dimensions music. I think it's supposed to do, I'm pulling some ass, but I'm assuming it's just like the 8 points of differentiation on your like hearing platform. Look it up. It's something to do with that, but it's spatial audio.
Okay, sounds just like stereo.
Spatial audio. Have a look at it. Video podcasting, as I said, it does expansion of branded podcasts, which has made me go bleh. But more companies may use podcasts as a marketing tool, leading to increased branding. There was a call out of just localized and regional content. So surging of just very specific, aka a podcast for Brisbane, a podcast for Logan, a podcast for Sunshine Coast, something like that. Educational tools, something about the discoverability. But there was one that made me go, cross-platform content integration. So podcasts might integrate more deeply with other forms of media like books, films, and TV shows, offering complementary content across different platforms. Now, that again once made me think it's going to start blending the boundary of, is that a podcast anymore if, you're like a clip that goes into a Netflix show or something like that in the middle of it. Is it? I'm not sure. I don't know. Does the definition of a podcast come into question into 2024 and beyond?
The podcast industrial complex will come up with it, yes, because that's what like that more video kind of thing is pushing. Because if you got more video, it's easy to advertise upon, and then that's easier to make more money if you're like going for like the real big type thing. But if you're the general average, so Pete Bowie, who I've had on the podcast once, he's got one called Learn Cardano. It's a relatively big channel. I think he's got like 20,000 subscribers or something like that. I've seen the stats that because he posts them up of how much he makes from his videos. It's like a pittance, man. It's an absolute pittance. And he's got a decent popular channel, but it's still niche. Like it's Cardano. Like it's not going to be like super big. And that's the kind of thing where it's like if you pushed him to video in the sense like you'll make more money from this. No. Well, maybe you will, but it's going to require a shit ton more time, effort. Chris Williamson, aka the big things, like even what we've got here is pretty ridiculous. We've got cameras, we've got roadcasters, we've got big lights.
Well, but even then, even if you could genuinely reproduce something Chris Williamson level of quality, it doesn't then just by default mean you're going to get 1 million views, something like that. The content itself still has to be
you have to
a quality standard. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, you can't just chuck people in. So here's to sum up the Podnews, what people generally were saying from there, which is basically almost the opposite of what the
podcasting complex said.
Yeah, so they were saying there's probably going to be more contraction. So there's more mergers and acquisitions, perhaps, but not from the sense of like a position of power, but in terms of we have to merge to survive type of deal. More layoffs, more shenanigans of ads and analytics and just bullshit numbers kind of being exposed as being bullshit. Content wise, it'll be more kind of like verticals, and this is where people were saying, oh, you might use video, but the only reason I can really see for using video is for marketing and growth of being exposed in a different way, because it's actually quite hard with audio. That's kind of why it is a slow grow. It's pretty you don't really get viral audio clips.
Yeah, like it's hard to, well, there's a limitation to how you advertise or you market an audio only thing.
Yeah, I think something probably inherent about audio makes it less viral. It's just think of, even you can put audio clips on any of these apps, audiograms and stuff, but you don't get
it's probably something to do with
from
the way that our mind, I wouldn't say, just the way that the mind over the last few years has evolved to react to the images, the color of social media that is introduced.
Could be.
It would be. I reckon this would be a different situation if we were in a world where those didn't exist. So if they didn't exist, and so maybe I'm pulling ourselves back to 20 years ago or something, or 30 years ago, where those platforms didn't exist, and so the attention maybe could be captured very specifically by that, and you could promote it, maybe. But now it's like the fight between, well, the dopamine hit that you get from a TikTok 5-second quick video, and then next and the next and the next. Yeah, there's absolutely no way there's competition that you can do with an audio only. Just listen to this for a minute to get a bit on. Nah.
Yeah.
It's
probably also because it's neglecting one of your senses, the sight. It's an audio only experience for a viral clip. I'm just trying to imagine, say I saw one on my phone, like what do I do? Do I close my eyes and bring it up to my head to listen to? Is that kind of the expected behavior? With a viral video clip, it's pretty obvious. Like you stare and look at the screen. Like everything is being focused in your visual, your audio. You're gonna have to use your hands.
I mean, in general, I don't particularly like ads. Maybe a good ad, I'd be like, it's kind of cool. But in general, I've never said that I want more ads. But I've heard dynamically inserted ads that are about other podcasts. So it's other podcasts trying to advertise themselves. Yeah. And it might not even be related to it. So I've heard some dynamic ad insertions of, hey, come and listen to our podcast. I can tell you, like, there's been 0 times that I've heard that and I've gone, you know what? I want to go and listen to our podcast because it's missing the whole fact of there's no like visual, I guess, to even incite anything else.
Yeah.
Till it's an ad. So I'm not like particularly going to be like,
yeah. First part,
in general, I'm going to go like, I don't know how those would even like realistically work. And I would wonder, me more like, has that ever worked if you listen to an ad that's about like audio wise, it's about something. Have you gone, oh yeah, I'm going to go and check that out more specifically because of that?
For some people, I think it can. I know Apple, for the teacher, Anna, she does a lot of those crossovers, and I think that's worked well for her. But yeah, probably like the closest you'll get to actual viral audio clip would be on a show like No Agenda, where they clip a lot of news, just sections and analyze it and deconstruct it. I'm sure some of those portions they've managed to clip one which is really, really good, and people have gone back and been like, did I just hear that right or something? And go back and find out. So perhaps something like that. But yeah, the whole point of video is just for the virality of it and being able to grow your podcast outside of the normal media channels and create more content that way. So there's some of that. And honestly, a lot of people are just saying to be more independent. They actually think there's going to be a lot more independent podcasts coming out and content which is niche and particular to that particular genre or whatever it is that they're explaining. So probably some of them are thinking like politics wise, but I'm sure there's
other niche things.
The world's just getting bigger. There's more cooler stuff going on. New games being invented all the time. I'd never heard of pickleball a couple of years ago. I'm sure there's a pickleball podcast out there, that sort of thing.
Probably.
Pickleball podcasts.
Yeah. There's in fact the new gym opening up here in Brisbane where we live. And one of the selling points is that they have a pickleball court.
There you go. Yeah. So, that sort of stuff I think is just going to become more prominent as well. And that's kind of what the sum up of the predictions were for them. I thought it'd be noteworthy just going over mine and James and Sam's. So mine was for more collaboration incentivized by V for V. And this was really easy because it was basically like, I'm just going to say what I'm going to do essentially. So, you know, I've got Cole doing the voice acting on the show, but I do plan for the Value for Value show to reach out to, there's a visual art. I need to check if you can do GIFs through Blueberry, as in uploading a GIF file and that to be able to play in your chapter art. But I know a dude who does Bitcoin specific visual images. He came to one of the meetups. I'm going to get the Dorfles and basically use them for intro music and start playing a song towards the end. So I'll have visual elements. I'll have Cole doing voiceovers in that show as well, in the Value for Value, and music. So it's like I'm incorporating a whole bunch of things already.
Yeah, that's cool.
And shit, if I'm feeling really crazy, I might do video and start putting it on No Agenda Tube or something. I don't know.
You won't.
No, I won't. I won't. But that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, that one I can predict because at least I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I think it's that sort of behavior will become more commonplace. You know, I could have just said like V for V music will be more popular. But in any case, so James, he was predicting more AI for tools. So this was like a generic one on purpose because Sam Sethi said it last year. So, and it was like the most generic prediction you can ever make. So he made that. He actually thinks YouTube podcasts, so in the YouTube Music app, will be Google's biggest product for podcasts because they had the Google Podcast app, which was...
Who uses it?
Yeah, it was... Well, a lot of people, actually. It was around 3%. It was bigger than most of the independent apps, actually, because it comes pre-installed on a lot of phones. Part of the reason for that, because it was a very basic app. I've tried it before. Not so great. So he actually thinks that'll probably get to like 5%, maybe. He said something like that. He thinks there's going to be one really big host bankruptcy. He has one particularly in mind. He hasn't said it publicly, so keep that in mind. A running joke. A running joke is the Apple Android app. He thinks Apple will make an app for Android, an Apple podcast app that you could download on Android. He's been saying that for years and it's never happened. So once again, like a little running joke there. And he actually thinks the IAB will be less important. So there's the analytics becoming less useful to people because of kind of the faulty reasons we were saying before. Sam's was Joe Rogan will join YouTube. And so he's actually bought the domain spotflix.com because he thinks there'd be like a merger of Spotify and Netflix, and he thinks that's like something that could happen. So he's bought spotflix.com. But yeah, Joe Rogan will join YouTube. He thinks micropayments will go mainstream. I would love if that could happen.
That would be cool.
He was thinking that would be more through something like Twitter, which does actually have Lightning wallets attached to every Twitter profile, but it's just never really been activated. He thinks social media will drive traffic just in terms of finding out new shows and stuff, so discoverability, and that cross-app comments will be a thing, which has been talked about for ages. But
that would be cool. But yeah,
it's a tricky one. It's been talked about a lot. I think it'll happen at some point. I think boosts will kind of be involved with that, but I don't know. I don't know if I don't know.
That was good. Yeah, no, I like that.
And Acast will buy a podcasting 2.0 app. So one of the podcasting 2.0 apps will get bought out. Is his prediction? Maybe his own.
His own, maybe. Yeah. Well, I am waiting for that sort of stuff like to start happening.
Well, yeah. So I sent an article and it's in the Discord, but it's a Forbes article and it had Jack Dorsey as the main kind of like front piece of it. But I had a really decent section about Adam Curry talking about value for value, and it made sense. Like it was a legit article about value for value on Forbes, and Forbes is not like a non-mainstream paper. That's mainstream as you can get. So I thought that was really cool. So
what we're trying to say, folks, is we are sad puppies today's musings, but by the tail end of 2024, everyone will know what value for value is.
They're better, man.
The percentage of people listening from podcasts will go from 64 to 99.9%.
Jesus.
And 80% of the world's
Are these
money
your
will be
predictions?
coming through just the mere mortal podcast. So,
oh man,
once we become the first quadrillionaires in the world,
we'll,
sure. everyone who sent through their initial boosts, I'll send you another free shirt. Promise you. So that's what you can expect.
Well, what are your legit predictions for 2024?
I think that there will be more growth to the video podcasts that utilize or leverage video.
Yeah. So if there's like 10% of podcasts at the moment doing video, that might go to like 20 or something.
No, I don't. I think it'll go up a little bit, not the 20. I don't think it'll double up immediately. I think there's going to be a case of
more views will go to podcasts, which have
I think if right now component. There's a general amount of views going to the people distributed in whatever way, there's going to be more of a distribution going towards the ones with video.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be incentivized by platforms in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Why do I think that too? Because it just takes more bandwidth to hold that sort of file size to be creating. Same with when you're playing a video, you're holding more data to be able to do that. I think they're going to, in some way, shape, or form, influence some of these algorithms to push towards that.
Yeah. Well, here's just an interesting little data point. So today I put out a short clip using AI of Cole when I showed for him the first time that I saw it. His Magic Mushroom Fun Time would be playable on the podcasting apps, which he didn't know, which was pretty funny. And that got more, likes, comments, reposts than basically any of the other stuff I've done in the last year. And it was still a very self-serving thing. It was just video form. I put in like a couple of hashtags. I think I put in one sentence saying like, "Oh, check out Cole's genuine reaction to this," and that generated more activity than any of the other posts I put out. So there is something to the video clips which do create virality and that's the sort of stuff that helps. So yeah, I'm not anti-video, but it's just I wouldn't necessarily call it a podcast. I think it's a useful tool, but it's an extension. It's an extension. It's an extension more interested about audio.
Yeah, only. Like it's an extension of a podcast, not so much what makes a podcast. But I think there's going to be more sort of a movement towards it. I do see some form of aggregation from the bigger companies. I think we're going to see whether it's Amazon buying more platforms or the like, in terms of just like little ones to continue buying up the hosting ones.
Yeah, Amazon's a weird one because they have
didn't they buy Overcast or something like that? I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah. I just know they've kind of delved into it, but there's no real Amazon podcast app, for example. I don't know if I go onto the Play Store if I'll find an Amazon podcast app. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I would have tried that out before if there was
available.
But it is just like, well, what are they doing then? If because they're a fucking big company as well.
Well, they make their money in I guess storages, right? Like storage in a similar way.
So they've got Amazon Music, which is song and podcast. Look, it's a big app. It's got 100 million downloads. So maybe it's just because maybe I'll give it a try.
I ventured into it. Yeah. But I think collectively as well, I think, and this I guess negatively, unfortunately, but I think that the landscape will continue to be more. Podcasts in general will trend to be more audacious as opposed to be more valuable.
Okay.
And I just think that's going to be a general trend. I hope it isn't the case.
So like more clickbaity?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a more clickbaity version to podcasts in general, as maybe like the next frontier of people trying to get eyeballs or, ears in this case onto podcasts. I've seen it maybe in a few podcasts that I've followed for many years, and only recently have I started to see I can see that you're starting to create some content here, maybe not for the true value that you're sharing, but for like a real purpose of doing something else.
Okay.
Case in point, Jocko.
Yeah.
Right? So the Jocko podcast has always been Jocko podcast, and he still continues it.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. There's now like the Jocko Underground, which only gets you to play like 10 minutes unless you pay for the actual setup.
So kind of paywall there.
Style. Cool, whatever. But he's actually started off a recent one called the Def Reset, which is Def. Can't remember exactly what it's called.
Okay.
And I started listening to it a little bit, and sure, it's got some good stuff into it.
What's it about? Like, what's the deal?
It's kind of rehashing a lot of discipline equals freedom content and pieces that he talks about already generally, which is if that was the intent of a podcast, cool. Okay, I like this. Like, give me more. And so I do listen to it. But what I've actually noticed is he's actually partnered it up with the fact that he's launched a new dev reset at the start of January for a annual goal set up and training. And so now it's starting to become much more like, oh, hey, we're releasing this. You should go do that. You can get money returned back from it and win. And I was kind of went, gee, I don't know if I'd ever expected Jocko or like that particular type of content to be seeing it through that format where it's, I guess you're now curating a podcast, but I don't know if the full intent of it is to provide that value in that format. It doesn't feel exactly like it, but it's like, oh, is this just one, well-structured way, advertised way just to get me to go and do that?
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that, and I feel like we're going to see some more of that into 2024, I reckon.
Gotcha, yeah. So I just downloaded the Amazon Music app, and the very first thing it requires is to sign up for an account or put in your account details. I obviously don't know my password and email off the get-go, so I can already see why this is not a top podcasting app. It's just like, who wants to do that? No one wants to do that. So should we jump into a summary?
I think so.
What do you reckon? Okay, so my summary, just it's a continually shifting medium. So I'd never say we've had personally for us, that we've ever had a breakout amazing moment, which is kind of fun because that makes me think, whatever happens in the future, I don't really think we'll look back and be like, man, podcasting used to be so much better when it was X, or this used to be so much better when it was Y. I think that's still ahead of us. And then maybe like in 10, 20 years time, that's when we can start saying that sort of shit. So this is where I think the heyday of V for V is still to come, basically. I think that's that's the trend of the cool stuff going forward, and I think that'll catch on. It's just when. Who knows how long that could take. Yeah, well,
we're definitely at the beginning of the bell curve ride that is, people coming into that space.
But it's getting bigger, and it is just related to technology adoption as well. Bitcoin and Lightning, that continues to grow. The experience of using it is much better. Everything gets me more excited when everything's so much easier. Like I know people are getting sick of probably hearing that, but it is so much easier than it was 2 years ago.
It does get easier and easier, that's for sure.
And even, all right, here's one. So and I've been asking this to a lot of the guests, do you think V for V could potentially be a new medium in and of itself? So podcasts are a distinct thing. There's been audio before, how different is it from radio? Well, you can play it whenever you want. You can't really do that with radio, but a lot of it is the same. It's just two people talking. And so do you think there could be a new medium V for V related one? So like if I create this show, which I was talking about, which incorporates music, incorporates visual elements, incorporates perhaps voice acting, is that sufficiently different to be called a new medium and have its own name? Like a V for V show instead of a podcast, for example.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good call out. My first reaction is I don't think so. So I go, well, what's the difference between that and a structured YouTube video that does all of that as well?
Yeah.
But maybe there could be enough differentiations of the technologies. And look, that's the thing. We know of like quite new technology that's being used in the podcasting space. If you're not playing around with the new apps that you've never really seen before, maybe there comes a real big turn in it and it's like, whoa, okay, this is new. This is a real full new medium. Maybe.
Yeah, I think receiving a boost for the first time, for example, that's a new experience that most people have never had, which is, holy shit, this person sent me money and it has a message.
What if value for value, could you imagine I'm not thinking this next year, but maybe next few years, where if you utilize value for value, it enhances the value a user gets in return.
Yeah, I think so.
In a sense, but sorry, maybe I think you agree in this way I'm saying it, but then in another way in the sense of what if
you're thinking more of a paywall type thing,
but in the sense of like, hey, you can listen to the full audio of us, but if you boost, you also then get the video.
Yeah. I think,
or if you're watching this, like you're listening and watching. But if you boost, you get the interactive. You're sitting next to us, like if you're in the studio.
Yeah, here's one. So I was doing a recording today for Podcast Guru because I agreed to do a highlighting video very similar to the one you can see on our website, meremortalspodcast.com/support, where I went through a run through of all the apps. And he was like, hey, can you do one specifically related to Podcast Guru? And I'll, put you on the front page of the app for a bit. And I was like, yeah, cool. Yeah, sounds excellent. I would love to do that. So I was doing the video for that today and just screen recording, going to Podcast Guru, testing out some things. And I played the Podcasting 2.0 show just as an example because I was just like, play. And one of the things that they have is they've got an automatic system set up where every boost that gets sent in, they've put a tiny split that goes to a service which sees the message, like uncovers the boost data, then gets the sats, where it came from, the person's name and the message, spits that all out in a format, in a square JPEG format, and inserts that into the podcast itself, chapters, so that every time that someone sends in a boost, for that kind of 30 seconds from when they sent the boost in, it appears as a chapter image. And I did that accidentally. And that's the kind of thing I'm imagining where you send in a boost. Now, it's kind of weird because it's unlikely you're going to go back and listen to the show again. So it's unlikely you're going to see your own message. But I think there could be things like that coming forward where it's, you boost in like that and then automatically in the next 30 seconds, because all of this is instantaneous, it gets put in and there's the thing, like when you boost and you do that, if you go back a minute later, you'll see it's super fucking quick.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could have something like that where you boost in and then instead of a minute in the past, it shows it a minute in the future. And you're like, holy shit, my message is in like within the Apple app, app itself. That's
I
cool.
think the interactivity might be, if that was to happen, I mean, it's a new medium, not really, but it's definitely a new way of interacting with a podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a new experience. Yeah. So yeah, I'm also ambivalent, unsure as to, because people were like this with ebooks as well when ebooks first came out. So I'm reading the Book Wars, and when they first coming out, they were like, this could be an entirely new medium. So when you're reading the book, you can get this immersive experience. Like you were talking about 8D things going on. When you're reading the section of the person walking down the street, you can hear like pitter-patter footsteps on the street. And then if you like click on this word, it'll expand out into this. They thought like all this different stuff could happen. Totally new medium, like the Kindle, the iPad, the tablets, they unlock a new medium to be able to consume content. What ended up happening was you basically just use it like a book. You press the page over. You don't want all of that extra shit.
No, exactly. Well, I think it comes to the content, like boiling it down. We're talking about it here. In podcasts in general, why would you choose to listen to a podcast over something else, reading a book or whatnot? Generally, you want to be entertained, or you want to listen to conversations or hear something from a much more audio perspective, right? A lot of things, if you want to, let's say something happens in the world, you could either probably choose to go and listen to it in some way, shape, or form, or watch something that gets presented or read about it, right? So it's like the different mediums. So I don't know how much it'll change in that regard, like from an audio perspective, but I think there'll be some changes coming. I think there's still going to be a lot of changes and surprises around the next few corners for podcasting. Yeah,
for sure. And so this is where I was saying I don't really believe in the PIC much, the podcast industrial complex. It's funny. I like saying it, but I don't actually think of it in the terms that I would.
I don't think it's big enough for that thing.
Agreed. Where you get really gross behavior. I think you get
like something like movies, right? We're not like movies would be like that. I'm sure there's some sort of complex there that like forces things to happen, and you can't do this.
Incredibly, if I've never been on like a full movie set, but even just the small commercial type things I was in, there's this person is in charge of this, and they have to do this, and there's a very structured hierarchy and plenty of things where it's that anti-paradox, like it's paradox but in the bad way. It makes no sense. It's frustrating. It's like, why would you need to do that, to do this? It's so dumb. So I don't really see that much of that occurring. But I do think money can ruin a good thing. And if too much money tries to come in, or people are trying to be too extractive or whatever it is, I think it can screw up what makes podcasting good. Then I look and go, thankfully Dave and Adam started podcasting 2.0. And I think that ball is rolling to the point where even if those two stopped, or one of them, stopped or passed away or whatever,
like kind of already gone enough of a roll.
I think it's at the point now where it's solid enough that that community would just form together again, and maybe it would take longer, or maybe it wouldn't be as dynamic, but I don't think it needs Adam nor Dave as the linchpins as maybe I would have said a year or two ago, where it was like, oh yeah, if they go away, like we're screwed.
This is why Dave stopped sending through the weekly boost for the mere mortal.
It could be, man. Could be. He's a busy dude, man. I always feel like whenever I send him an email, I'm just like, oh god, like I feel bad taking up his precious time. And so then just like, I think 2024 is going to be big. I think it's like going on into our general optimism for 2024, which is not just related to podcasting, but I think just general, stuff in our personal lives as well. I don't know. I already talked about how most of the convos are going to be V4V related. I think I might even take snippets of that and use that in the V4V show, which I've done somewhat in the past. I'm just I'm optimistic for sure. 2023 for the industry as a whole, like if you're going over the highlights for the year, most people's highlights were kind of small pitter-patter things, and then James and Sam did their lowlights as well, and all the lowlights were like pretty bad, man. It's just like, Spotify's laying off people, these people are laying off people, podcasting has shrunk in this manner. Like advertising's lots of advertisers are pulling out. They're all moving to TikTok and YouTube. Like there's a dearth of money. It was pretty bad in terms of a lot of those metrics. So I don't know if that'll continue or not. Once again, it doesn't really matter to us because that's not what we're trying to do. But there you go. We're looking at for us, it's going to be good. Yeah.
Optimistically, folks. Optimistically.
Agreed.
Very good.
All right, big episode than I thought it'd be, man.
Big session. But for sure, if you've listened in the whole way here, Immortalized, thank you very much, of course, for tuning in to the session here at Musings. We are in the new studio once again. If you've been listening in,
I don't know if this will be a regular thing. Maybe like once in a while. I hit a bunch of traffic coming here. It was like 15 minutes more traffic than I thought it'd be.
Damn, no fun. No. So we definitely will.
But I did come earlier, so that's all right.
We'll be probably on like the online setup / maybe the other studio more than anything. Maybe once and again we might do here, but
that's fun, man. I like it. It's a nice place.
I'd probably say again, Boostagram side of things. We are seeing the streaming coming through, which is awesome. Thank you very much. But we do want to see those Boostagrams. We want to see those comments. Messages. We want to see those messages. We want to see those boosts coming through. They help for us to create the podcast, folks. Again, when we are doing it in a video, we are doing a live version through YouTube, but there is a core focus of the podcast, and that requires some costs to actually operate, both capital and expenses operating wise. So those help out in that format. Also helps us understand and see people supporting in that way. So why we want you to support. So
we've made some games related to it. If you boost in 100,000 sats, you will get a Mere Mortals t-shirt, very similar to the one what Juan's wearing, but with a
Mere Mortals
logo in front of it.
And there's not too many of them left. Once again, the price of BTC keeps going up.
It does,
man. The
more
you delay,
they're $70 now.
Jeez, man,
they were 22 not too long ago.
Not too long ago. So get into them quick before they become $1,000.
Yeah,
or
could
more.
happen.
Imagine if Satoshi become $1 in 2039.
That'll be an expensive t-shirt.
Very expensive t-shirt. All right, I think we're going to leave it there. Me and Mortal Lads, I hope you have enjoyed if you're listening to it live or wherever you are at home. We're always live Australian time, 7 p.m. We didn't actually call out that today.
Yeah, we forgot to.
The 10th of January. For now, me and Mortal Lads, hope you're well. One out.
Current out. Bye.
Good.
Very good.